Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoterica. We got a really exciting episode for you guys this week because we're taking a look at a prototype 3DO M2, more specifically the Panasonic FZ-21 ES4. This is an engineering sample console, and unfortunately it does not belong to me. I'm actually reviving this to working order for another collector, although I would love to keep it. Maybe we'll just tell them it never arrived and you can pretend this video doesn't exist. All kidding aside, if you could do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like, subscribe, and that notification bell. Definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, we got a Patreon link down there as well, because this is definitely a really fun thing to look at. Basically, we've talked a lot about the 3DO M2 on the channel, but this is the console case. Now, the FZ-21 did release in 1998 as a kiosk unit, and it is basically identical hardware inside, but this was near to final of the console hardware before Panasonic canceled the release. You'll see here there's a power button and open button. It is just a console design. The interesting thing, other than the fact that this CD-ROM door needs a lot of work, and I'll be working on that in another video to get it opening smoother, is I didn't realize that those buttons pushed in. I thought they pushed down, but it is quite an interesting design, and you can see how close the shell design is. You got your CD-ROM drive in there, everything is molded in nicely. This is basically the finished console. Now inside is a different story, and we'll talk about that once we get in there, but you'll see here, the plastics are definitely different, and there is some sun fading to them. Now, when I worked at Burton and we would deal with plastics manufacturing, we would definitely put different pieces onto different pairs of sunglasses and goggles to see how they looked together and how they reacted. I think that's what we're dealing with here. But it is quite an interesting design. Now around the back you're going to see a lot more of the guts of the system. On the left you're going to have a communication input right there that was probably used for networking two systems together, but we don't really know what it got used for. You have your composite video in, S-video, and then AV multi-out jack, which is kind of interesting. And then you have an expansion port, that's a PCMCIA slot, and then your power in. Unfortunately, it is missing the door. I'm not sure where that went. It doesn't belong to me, and I don't think the collector has it either, so somewhere along the way it got lost. But taking a look in the front, it definitely just looks like a console, which is really fun to see because this is the first time I've seen one in person. Now, there is some issues with the molding. It definitely isn't final because that little bit of clear plastic where the LED would come through is not molded perfectly, and this memory card door does not like to return to closed. A couple controller ports around the front, standard 3DO style. And again, this door needs a lot of work as it does not like to open. It's definitely going to need some grease at the minimum. But taking a look at the bottom, you're going to see here, it's marked ES4 Dev Unit number 3. Now I don't know what ES stands for, but I'm assuming it's engineering sample. Most of the time when you get boards made, you're going to get kind of development proofs in to see what's going on and make sure they work before you put your whole run in. But you're going to see it is the Bulldog ASIC model 2.1, and then it just gives you information on what manufacturer made the RAM, the CD-ROM firmware version, and the Power PC version. There's some Japanese on this, so I'm assuming this must have been put together in Japan. And you'll see a little sticker there with a number as well, but this is unit number 3. Now interestingly, on the top there is no mold for the reset button. You'll see here on the Panasonic FZ-21 that came out as a kiosk, there is a reset button in the top, so this mold would have not been considered final, but it wouldn't be too hard to put that hole in. Now around the bottom we're going to dismantle this thing and we're going to take a complete look inside, because before I actually power this on, I want to make sure it's ready to receive power. I want to check the caps, I want to check all the wires inside, because I'm not as fast as power. I push the power button, there's an issue, this thing is toast. There's not another one out in the world like it, so we definitely want to be a little careful, and I'm like that with all rare hardware. When I get it in, I definitely check it out before I do put power to it. But now that we've removed those 4 screws, we can pop the top clean off. And this is the first time I've been into it, so the previous person that had it, the owner, must have disconnected that CD-ROM drive. No big deal, but you'll take a look on the left. We have the power supply, and then we have this RF shield on the top with a little fan cutout as well. It's a really elegant design. It's definitely missing a lot of screws. This shield is not secured in place whatsoever. I may try to find some screws and pop those down, but no huge deal. But taking the lid off, you're going to see the 3DO M2 board. Now taking a closer look, I'm surprised they used a ribbon cable to move power and it's not an actual like hardwired connection. I guess it doesn't draw enough power to really get too warm on that ribbon cable. I'm just kind of surprised to see that. But anytime I'm working on something, I will disconnect the power supply to the main board. You'll see here we have that memory card slot, and we've got a couple different tabs that would tell you basically if the CD-ROM drawer was open. One of them is broken off, and I found one of the pieces underneath the power supply, so that's good. We got our RAM chips right here, 8 megabytes, and then we have all the other chips that comprise a 3DO. The PowerPC 602 processors, the 3DO bus chip, and the Bulldog ASIC. Back there is just that PCMCIA slot again, and you're going to notice there's 2 chips that are not on the board, and that is going to become really important in just a second, because this does not function. Those 2 chips there that are missing, IC 631 and 632, should have BIOS files in them. This unit does not have a BIOS in it whatsoever, and that is what we're going to be working on fixing for the owner. You'll see it is copywritten 1996, and in 96 this console was supposed to come out, so you know how close it really did get. And this is where you slot the PCMCIA card in there. The owner sent me a card. It's an ATA PC card. That's not going to work for what we're trying. We actually need a linear flash card. But taking a look here just closer at the chipset, you're going to see there's a lot of handwriting on this. This was put together a lot by hand. Of course, those chips weren't put on there by hand, but you're going to see a lot of different residue on the board where a lot of the flux was not cleaned off. And you're going to see on that PowerPC 602 chip, there was a bodge wire. It's marked number 3 on the memory card, and it's marked number 3 on the bottom, so we know the case, the sticker, and the board inside all do go together. What I want to take a look at is the power supply, because I want to make sure all the caps are good. And you're going to see here the same screwdriver doesn't fit in that hole, and that's how much of a kind of put together hack job this console really is. Usually all the screw heads fit. They might use different types of screws, but it's rare that you have to take a second screwdriver head and get anything out. But popping the power supply out, it's a really nice design. There's a couple tabs that hold that down there, and we're just going to take a look closer at it to make sure there's no issues. There's a couple bits of epoxy on some of the caps. I originally thought it may have been something leaking, but I tasted it. They do taste different. Don't try it at home. And it is just really softly hand applied epoxy. You'll see there's the power switch all the way in the back, and that is a very strange placement for it. We'll talk about that in a second, but you can see that there are just pieces of paper with writing on them stuck to the board. But as I take a look around everything, I see no issues whatsoever with any of the caps. There's no evidence that this power supply is a problem. That's just some more epoxy. So I am comfortable at least putting power to the power supply without any of the magic smoke escaping. But on the top, you're going to see the entire CD-ROM assembly, and it does come off with the lid. It's actually a really elegant design. I like it. And that's that ribbon cable that connects to the motherboard. And that same sticker from the CD-ROM BIOS version on the bottom of the case is on that BIOS chip. On the left, we're just going to have a very basic fan. It spins fine. It's not going to really require any maintenance unless I turn it on, it doesn't work. But this is the most over-engineered power button I've ever seen. It travels 2/3 of the length of the console just to turn the power supply on. It's a cool design, but I definitely see that maybe being an issue in the future if this actually came out. You'll see here, the motherboard is not secured to the case with any screws, so being careful, I can pop this entire thing right out of the case. I was going to pop the bottom RF shield out as well, but it looks like it's glued in one spot towards the back left, so I just ignored that completely. But now getting the motherboard bare out, this is like 99% complete. Unfortunately, missing a BIOS, of course, and we think we're going to be able to remedy that, but it's going to take a bit. And underneath, what I didn't expect to find is there is a second PCMCIA slot, and that's actually where we're going to be slotting a BIOS in, and we'll deal with that in another video. But again, on the bottom, you can see how much handwork is done on this board. There is just flux residue left everywhere, and they didn't clean it up. That's really no big deal. Maybe I'll clean it up for the owner, we'll see. And on the side, there is a switch that I believe, once I use my multimeter, will change what slot the M2 reads that card from, because you can put a card in the top or you can put a card in the bottom. So I'm highly assuming that's what that switch does, but I still need to confirm that. By just taking another closer look at the board, you can even see we have 2 different resistors that are soldered together in different test points. Clearly, this board was not working when it came in, and it did require a few hand fixes, but you can see the evidence of somebody's hand across this entire board. And that's just kind of how these prototypes work. You even have a bodge wire between pin 32 to 32 on the PowerPC 602s. That means they forgot to draw the trace in when they were designing the board, and they fix that with a simple wire. Now, that's not that abnormal. Some finished consoles have those in them too. But if you take a look at the arcade board on the right versus the console board on the left, they're near identical. All the chips are laid up in the same spots. They're both in diagonal configurations, and underneath Bulldog is the RAM. And since all the RAM was unified, it's not surprising that it's as close to Bulldog as it is. But they really look almost identical in their configuration, except, of course, some have different chips. And you can even see the silk screening on the bottom. Other than the models being different, that says ES4, and that's the board revision versus the arcade model. They are almost the same. And shockingly, not shockingly, it almost fits in the console design case. We're just about a millimeter or two off on the front, and where the fan is for Bulldog is exactly where the fan cutout is for the console variant. But now we've taken it apart, we need to put it back together because I do now trust that I can apply power to this console. Nothing bad's going to happen. We'll just pop the motherboard back in and we'll reconnect that ribbon cable that drives the power into the motherboard. And then all we'll do after that is go ahead and put that RF and protective shield back on the top so that we can get this back together. Now, like I said, the big issue with this console is there is no BIOS on it. All it does is receive power and it gets ready to be functioning. No BIOS is basically like a car without a driver. It can do something, but it needs input. It needs to be told what to do. And that's what we're going to be dealing with in the next video. Hopefully we can revive this. But that is the Panasonic 3DO M2 FZ-21 ES4 engineering sample prototype console. It's great to be able to take a look at it. I wish it belonged to me, but if it doesn't, at least I get to check it out and try to fix it. Short of that, will we have more content on this console coming up soon? But if you could do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like, subscribe, and that notification bell definitely helps us out. And we'll be back with more videos on Sunday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. But we'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.